All right, so chapter 2, section 3, we're going to be analyzing graphs of functions. Now for the sake of our class, we're only going to be looking at the domain range, any intervals of increasing, decreasing, or constant, and evaluating function values given a graph, right? So you don't have to worry about, at least in this section, even and odd functions and finding the zeros of a function. Zeros of a function we did in section 2.2a, I believe. Right, so it was our first section on functions, right? We had done that before. All right, so we're going to start with domain and range. You've seen this before in Algebra 1, right? So a domain is going to be all the values of our graph from left to right, and these are going to be your x values, right? Your range is going to be your values from the bottom to the top, and these are going to be your y values. The only thing that you're doing different this time around, as opposed to when you did it in Algebra 1, is you're going to write your answer in interval notation, right? And just like before, when we were working with interval notation, if you see a solid dot, you're going to use a bracket, and if you see an open dot, you're going to use parentheses. All right, now any intervals of increasing, decreasing, and constant is also going to be new to you guys. You read the graph from left to right, right? So left to right, what else do we read from left to right? You read your domain also from left to right. So what does this mean? Anytime you're looking for intervals of increasing, decreasing, or constant, you're only looking at x values. Only x values. All right, only x values. All right, this is super important because a lot of you get confused and we'll look at the y values. So let's say you're looking at, let's say the function is increasing from this number to that number. Right, you're not looking where it's increasing, or no, what it's increasing to. You're looking at the interval in which it is increasing, right? So you're just reading the graph from left to right, seeing where it goes up, right? Where it goes up, it's going to be increasing. Where it goes down, it's going to be decreasing, and where it's completely flat, right? So that's where your graph is constant. And we're going to be using parentheses always. Right, so I'm going to say always use parentheses. All right, even if you see an open circle, even if you see a closed circle, any intervals of increasing, decreasing, or constant, you can write it with parentheses, just because you can't be increasing at a particular point, right? So that's why we don't include a point in our interval, right? We use parentheses just to show that we're moving. Okay, so we're going to start with example 1. Let's first start with finding our domain and range. All right, so we'll start with the domain. Domain is going to be your x values, right? And you're reading it from left to right. So x values, and you're going from left to right. Left to right, right, in this direction. Right, so let's go all the way to the left of this graph right here. Right, if you go all the way to the left and you're going in this direction, the first value of x that you reach is going to be this open circle right here, right? And that's going to be at an x value of -3. Right, so this graph is going to start at an x value of -3, and you see an open circle, so our domain is going to start with a parentheses -3. All right, and then as you keep going up this graph, right, we're still on the graph, we're still on the function, and then we end up at an open circle, or a closed circle right here, right? I know it says 2, right? You see 2 right next to that dot, so you might be tempted to write a 2, right? We're looking at the x values, right? And the x value that we reach is going to be this one right here. We have an x value of 0 with a closed circle, right? So your domain is going to be -3, 0 with the bracket. All right, and then we see a little gap, right? So there's a little gap right here. All right, to represent a gap, we would write a union, right? Because we're going to have another interval. All right, so there's a gap, I'm going to write a union. And then we start again at this open circle right here. Right, and then that open circle is going to start at an x value of +2, sorry. All right, and since it's an open circle, we're going to write it with the parentheses. All right, so parentheses 2 and then we see that it's going up, up, and up. All right, and since there's an arrow, right, the arrow just implies that it's going forever in that direction, right? So we're going to go 2 to infinity, right, are all the possible values of x here. All right, let's do the same thing with our range. Right? Our range is going to be all of our y values. Right? And this one we read from bottom to top. All right, so going up in this direction. All right, let's do that for our range. All right, so if we're going up, right, we're going to go up from the bottom to the top. What's the first y value that we hit our function? All right, if you see the lowest point in our graph is going to be right here at this open circle. All right, and it's an open circle at a y value of 0. All right, so that means our range is going to start at 0 with the parentheses since it's an open circle. All right, and this little piece of it, as we keep going up, right, we end up at a y value of 2, right? So we end up at this point right here, 2, with a closed circle. So we're going to write 0, 2 with a bracket. All right, we see another little gap right here between our two pieces of our function, right? So we're going to write a union, right? So u. And we start again at this open circle, right? And this is going to be a y value of 3, right? So union, we have a parentheses 3, and then we're going up to infinity, right? Because we see the arrow pointing upwards, that means we're going forever in that direction. So from 3 to infinity is going to be our interval, our range, all right? So this is our domain and range. So what does this represent? It just represents all of the x values that are covered by our function and all of our y values that are covered by our function. All right. And then now let's move on to any intervals of increasing, decreasing, and constant. Right. So like I said in the previous slide, any intervals of increasing, decreasing, and constant, these you have to look at your x values. Right, so you're going from left to right, going in this direction, right? You're not looking at where it's increasing to, right? You're looking in which interval are we going up. All right, so let's go from left to right. Same thing with our domain, right? We're going to go in this direction. All right, the first point that we hit is going to be this value right here. And then this little piece of our function, right, which direction are we going in? Right, so if you start here at this open circle, right, notice that to get to this next point right here, we're going to have to go up, right? So we're going up, up, up until we get to this point right here at 2, and this point right here ends at an x value of 0, right? I understand it looks like you're going from 0 to 2, right, with your y values, right? But you're looking at your x interval to see in which interval we're going up in, right? So far we're going up from -3 to 0, right? Because at this point right here and at this point right here is piece of our function in which we're going up from left to right. So far we have our interval of increasing is going to be from -3 to 0. And again, we always use parentheses even if you see a closed circle. Let's keep looking at our graph, right? In this next little piece of it, right, we start at 2, right? So this piece starts right here at 2. And then going to the right, going to the right, in what direction are we going in? Are we going up, down, or are we staying flat? It looks like we're going up, right? So we're going to go up in this direction. As we're going up, right, this means that we're increasing still, right? So we're still going to be increasing. So I'm going to write a union. And from 2 to infinity, right, it doesn't look like we stop increasing, is going to be your interval of increasing, right? Notice that your interval of increasing looks like your domain, right? So everything in purple, so all of these answers are going to in some way, shape, or form reflect your domain, right? Maybe little pieces of it are going to go in increasing, and then other parts are going to go in decreasing, other parts are going to be constant. That's fine, but everything in your domain should be accounted for. And then if you look at our graph, right, we already covered everything, right? So there's no parts of it where we're going to be decreasing. I'm going to write D and E for does not exist. We don't have any intervals of decreasing, and we don't have any intervals of constant, right? We're not flat anywhere. All right? And then all of these are going to be your answer for this graph right here. All right, let's try another example. All right, so let's look at the one right next to it, right? Let's look at example 2. Again, let's start with our domain, and then we're going to do a range. All right, so our domain is going to be our x values. We're going from left to right. All right, so let's keep going this way. All right, so let's go in this direction. If you notice that we start in an arrow, right, this arrow just implies that we're going forever and ever in that direction, right? So if we're going forever in that direction, we're going to start our domain at negative infinity, right? There is no smallest value that we get to, right? It's going to start all the way to the left. All right, and as we keep going this way, right, keep going this way, we end up at this open circle right here, and this is at an x value of -2. Right, so this little piece of our function is going to end at -2. It's an open circle, so it's a parentheses. And then you see that there's a little gap right here. So over here, there's a gap. And then we start again right here at this open circle, at this closed circle, sorry. And then this is at an x value of 1. Right, so I'm going to write a union, right, to show that there's a little gap. And then we're going to start again at 1 with a bracket. And we're going to end, right, so we keep going up, and then we end up at an x value of 2 with an open circle, right, so parentheses. And this is our domain. All right, let's do the same thing with our range, right, going from the bottom to the top, right? It looks like we have an arrow, right? This arrow, again, means you're going forever down, right? So that means we're going to start at negative infinity. And we're going to end this little piece of it, right? If we keep going up, we stop touching our function right here at this open circle. And this open circle is going to be at a y value of 0. So from negative infinity to 0. And it's an open circle, so we're going to have a parentheses. All right, we have another little gap right here, right? So it's a gap. And the next point in which we touch our graph is going to be right here at this closed circle again. Right, and this closed circle is at a y value of 1. So I'm going to write a union, bracket 1, and we're going to end at this open circle. And this open circle is at a y value of 2. All right, so from 1 to 2. All right, so this is our range. And now let's look at our intervals of increasing, decreasing, and constant. So increasing. All right, let's do the same thing. Right, increasing, again, we're looking at our x value, so we're reading this one from left to right. The only thing here that you should be reading not from left to right is your range, right? And you're reading it from bottom to top, right? So you're going up. Everything else, you're going from left to right, and you're seeing how your function is behaving, right? So starting all the way to the left, if you're going to the right, right, notice that you're starting in an arrow. Even though you see this arrow is pointing down, that doesn't mean your function is going to be decreasing because you're looking at its behavior from left to right. So if you keep going this way, right, notice that to get from, let's say, this point to this point, we have to go up, right? We're going up. That means in this entire piece of our function, we're going to have to go up. As we get further and further to the right, we go up, up, and up, and then we stop going up right here at an x value of -2, right? So I understand it looks like the y value is at 0, right, which it is, right? But we're not looking at the y value. We don't really care what number it's increasing to. We care the interval in which it happens, right? So it's going to start from negative infinity. We're increasing to -2, right? This is the x values in which we are increasing, right? So from this interval, we're going up. All right, and then there's a little gap, and then I'm going to write a union because the next piece of it, notice that this is our next piece of our function. We're going up still, from left to right. We're still going up, so I'm going to write a union, and then we're going up still from 1 to 2. And then again, you always use parentheses here, you don't use brackets. All right. And then that covers our entire function, right? So that means we're not decreasing anywhere. I would write does not exist. And we're not constant anywhere. I would write does not exist. All right, and that's it for that one. All right, let's look at the next one. All right, let's do the same thing. Let's find our domain. Let's find our range. Again, domain left to right. You're looking at your x values, right? You're going from left to right. Your leftmost point, you see an arrow. That arrow means you're starting from negative infinity. All right, and this piece of our function right here ends at an open circle. This open circle is at an x value of -3. All right, so from negative infinity to -3, and it's an open circle, so it's a parentheses. All right, we see a gap, right? In this little part, we have a gap. All right, and then we start touching our function again at an x value of -2, right? So there's a closed circle right there at -2. All right, so I'm going to write a union, bracket -2. And then this little piece of it, we're still touching our function, right? And we stop touching our function right here at this open circle, right? And this open circle is at a x value of 1, right? So parentheses 1. All right, and then you keep going and you still have gaps right here. But there's still function to the right of it, right? So we're going to have to write another union, right? And then we start touching our function again at this open circle. This open circle is going to be at a value of 3. All right, so union, if it's open circle, it's parentheses, so parentheses 3. And then as we keep going to the right, we're still on our function and we're at an arrow. Right, so this arrow means that we're going forever in that direction, so we're going forever to the right. All right, so to infinity. All right, let's do the same thing with our range. All right, so range is you're going from the bottom up. You're looking at your y values here. All right, so go from the bottom up, you keep going. The first point at which you touch your function is going to be right here. Right, so you touch it at this closed circle. Right, and everything over here, you're also at a y value. Even though right here you're not because of that open circle. Even right here, there's an open circle. Right, you're still on your function. As long as a y value exists, you include it in your range. Right, so our range is actually going to start from 1, right, with the bracket. Right, because this y value right here, okay, so this is our y value of 1. All right, and there is pieces of our function there, right? We have this closed circle and we have this little segment right here, right? Even though, like I said, there's an open circle here and an open circle here, our function still exists at some part of our graph, right? So we're going to have to include it. So it's going to be a 1 in a bracket. And then as you keep going up, on this part right here, you're still on your function, right? So it's going to be from 1 to infinity. Is going to be a range, right? All right, and now let's look at increasing, decreasing, and constant. All right, so let's look on our graph. And let's go from left to right. Coming all the way from the left, notice that we start at this little arrow right here. Again, just because you see an arrow pointing up doesn't mean you are increasing, right? Because you're looking at your behavior from left to right, right? So if your behavior from left to right, right, on this piece of our function, right, we're actually going down, right? We're going down from left to right until we reach this open circle right here. So we're decreasing here, right? We're decreasing from negative infinity to -3. All right, let's keep going. All right, the next piece of our function is going to start right here at -2. All right, so right here at -2. And then as you move from left to right, right, are we going up or down or staying flat? Right, it looks like we're staying flat. So from -2 up until this open circle right here, so up until 1, we are staying flat. So this is an interval of constant. It's going to be from -2 to 1. Right, and again, always use parentheses. And then increasing. All right, let's look at the next one. Maybe it's increasing. It looks like it is, right? So starting at this open circle right here, we're going to go up, right? We have to go up from left to right. If we're going up from left to right, this is an interval of increasing. So we start increasing at 3, and we keep increasing to infinity. All right. All right, hopefully that helps with that page. We're going to do some more examples in the next one. Okay, so let's keep going. We're actually going to finish at this slide, right? So anything after this, you don't have to worry about, right? So just this slide and the last one. We're still going to find everything that we found on the last slide. So domain, range, increasing, decreasing, constant behavior. And now we're going to evaluate the function at the indicated value, right? So first, let's start with just domain and range, right? I'm going to start, I'll write that over here, right? So I'm going to write D for domain. I'm going to abbreviate it, right? Our domain, we're going from left to right. Now, if you're going all the way to the left, right, looks like all the way to the left as we go inwards to the right, the first value of x that we reach is going to be right here at -2, right? And it's an open circle, so it's going to be -2 with a parentheses, comma, and then if we keep going to the, to the right, we end up at this value right here, right? This closed circle, and this closed circle is at an x value of 0, right? So we're going to end up at -2 comma 0 with a bracket, right? There's a little gap, so I'm going to write a union, and then our function starts again at this x value right here, right? It's going to be at this open circle, right? And it's going to be in an x value of 1. So union, and I'm going to write a 1 with a parentheses since it's an open circle, and then we keep going up, and then this arrow means you're going forever in that direction, so from 1 to infinity. All right, and this is your domain. Your range is going to be your y value. So start at the very bottom, and you're going to go up to the top. All right, so coming from the bottom up. All right, the first y value that we reach is going to be this one right here. We're going to start at -4. And this is a closed circle, so it's going to be a bracket. -4. And then as you keep going up, even though there's a little bit of a space right here, we're still touching our function, right? We started touching it right here. So if we keep going up, we're still on our function, right? As long as we're on our function at some point going up, then it counts in our range, right? So we're going to start at -4, and then this little piece of it ends right here, right, at this y value, right? But if you keep going this way, you're still on your function, right, on this piece of it, right? And this piece of it is still going to be going up. We're going up to infinity. So this is going to be our range from -4 to infinity. All right, in class, the way that I kind of represented this was, let me see if I can bring a shape right here. Let's see if I can do something. All right, so let's see if I can take this line. Okay, cool. So let me see if you can see this. So in class, I showed you guys this line, right? If you're dragging it from the bottom to the top, the first point in which we touch our graph is going to be right here at -4, right? And as you keep going up, you're still touching your graph, right? So even though right here, you see that you're crossing an open circle, you're still on your graph at that other segment, right? And as you keep going up, you're still on your function, right? And then at this point up, you stop touching that other segment, but you're still on it with this part that's curved and going up, right? And then this arrow right here just means you're going up, right? So if you keep dragging this little line up, right, it's going to go all the way up to infinity. All right, so that line that I just drew, that represents your range, right? I had showed you guys in class something like that. And I can do the same thing for domain, right? So let me try to draw this little, I'm gonna try to draw the same thing. Little line right here, right? So this line right here is gonna represent our domain, right? So if you drag it from the right, or no, yeah, from the left going to the right, you keep going, the first part of your function that you touch is gonna be right here at this open circle, right? And what value of x is that? We see that we're at -2. Right, so we keep going, we're dragging this line across, we're still touching our function, and we stop touching our function right here at an x value of 0, and it's an open or a closed circle, right? And then if you keep going, notice that there's a gap, right? So we do need that union, because this vertical line, no matter where you put it, as long as it's between these two values, you're not touching your function at all. But if you keep going to the right, you start at an open circle, and this open circle is at 1. And then if you keep dragging it, right, you're still on your function. And if you drag it forever in this direction, you're never going to stop touching your function because of this arrow right here. You're going to infinity, right? So this little line right here, if you keep dragging it, right, no, even though it's off the graph, you're still going to be touching your graph at some point, right, if you keep going to the right, and that represents your domain. All right, so hopefully that helps clear things up. Hopefully it's easier to visualize. And now let's do any intervals of increasing, decreasing, and constant. All right, so going from left to right, right, just like our domain, go from left to right. The first value that we touch is right here at -2, and onwards from -2, we're going to be going down, right? So we are going down, and we touch this point right here, right? So that means we're going to be decreasing from -2 to 0, right? What does this mean? Starting at an x value of -2, we're going down, and we stop going down at a x value of 0. All right, is that it for decreasing? It looks like it, because the next part of it, right, our next x value that we reach is at 1. And starting at 1, if you're going 1 to the right, right, notice that you're going up, right, up, up, up. You keep going up. This is an interval of increasing. And your interval of increasing is going to start at 1, and it's going to go all the way to infinity. And then we're not going to have any intervals of constant, right? We're not completely flat anywhere on this graph, so I'm going to write D and E does not exist. Right? So that answers everything that we did in the previous slide, right? The only thing that's new in this slide is that now we have function values to evaluate. Keep in mind, these are all functions of x, right? So that means the number that you see on the inside, right? So let's look at the 0. Right, if you see the 0 on the inside, that is an x value of 0. Right, so if we have an x value of 0, right, let's find on our graph where x is 0, and then let's touch our function. Where is our function at x equals 0? It's at a y value of -4. Right, so f of 0 is going to be -4. Right, let's do the same thing with 3. Right. What does this mean? Our x value is going to be 3, right? So if you go on the x-axis where x is 3, what y value is that? This is a y value of 0, right? So we're at this point right here. So f of 3 equals 0. All right, and that's all you have to do there. All right, let's do the same thing with the next one. All right, let's look at number 5. All right, if you like the little line that I drew, right, I'll keep using it, right? So let's do the same thing with domain, right, range, right? So for your domain, right, let me try to take this line right here. Okay, I can't drag the line, but anyway, if you're going from the left going to the right, notice that we see an arrow, right? This arrow means that you're going forever in that direction. So our domain, we're going to start at -infinity. Right, and then if we keep going to the right, notice that we have another arrow, right? This arrow means you're going forever in that direction, so you're going forever to the right. So our domain here is going to be from negative infinity to infinity. All right, let's look at our range. All right, going from the bottom to the top, right, starting at the very bottom, the first value that we reach is this little closed circle right here. And this is at a y value of 1, right? And we are including it, so it's going to be a bracket with a 1. And then you want to keep going up, right? Notice that we have arrows, right? We're going up in both directions, so it's going to be from 1 to infinity. All right. And now let's do our intervals of increasing, decreasing, and constant. All right, so going from the left to the right, it looks like coming in from the left, right, we're going to be going down, right? So we're going down, down, down from left to right, and then we stop going down at this point right here. Now what interval is that going to be? It's going to be from negative infinity to 0. So what does this mean? It means from negative infinity to 0, our graph is moving downwards, right? And then after this point right here, after 0, we're going to be going up. We're going up, 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 and we never stop going up, right? So we're going to be increasing from 0 to infinity, right? And there's nowhere on this graph that we're completely flat, so constant is going to be D and E for does not exist. All right, and let's do the same thing that we did in the previous problem. Let's find the function value at 0, right? So this right here, the 0 just means this is an x value of 0. So let's find where x is 0. It's going to be right here, all right? And then we end up at this point right here. We end up at a y value of 1. So f of 0 would be 1 here. All right, good. Let's move on to the next one. Let's do the same thing, right? Let's find our domain, our range, any intervals of increasing, decreasing, and constant. All right, so let's start with our domain, right? Going from left to right, so going in this direction, right? We start right here at this open circle, and this looks like it's at an x value of negative 5. All right, so we're going to start at negative 5 with a parentheses. And if we keep going to the right, we stop at an x value of negative 3. Right, so from negative 5 to negative 3 is going to be our first interval, and there's a closed circle, so we're going to have a bracket. There's a gap, right? And if there's a gap, write a U for union, right? Because we're going to have another interval here. Our other interval is going to start right here at this open circle, and this open circle is at an x value of negative 1. Right, and so you're going to keep going and going to the right, and then you stop at this closed circle right here. Right, this closed circle right here is at an x value of 1. Right, so we're going to go from negative 1 to 1 with a bracket. All right, there's another gap, but there's still parts of our function missing, right? So we're going to have a u because we have another interval, right? Our other interval is going to start at this open circle right here, right? And it's going to be an open circle at 3, right? So union 3, and then we're going downwards, right? We're going downwards, but it's still an arrow, so we're going forever in that direction. So our domain is going to end at 3 to infinity, right, with the parentheses. All right, and that's our domain, right? And our range, we're going from the bottom to the top, right? So going up, up, and up, right? We have our function starting right here with this arrow, but this arrow just means you're going forever down, right? So that means your range is going to start at negative infinity, right? And so you're going to keep going up, up, and up, right? So you're still at your function right here, right? There's an open circle here, but there's a closed circle right here. So your function does exist for a value of y, right? So at this value, y equals 1. So we're not going to stop our range there and have a union, right? Because it still exists for this part right here and this one right here, right? We have closed circles here, so our function does exist. Remember, with functions, y values are allowed to repeat. The only things that cannot repeat are your x values, right? So even though it doesn't work here, it does work here and here, right? We have two different y values for which our function works, right? So we're just going to keep going. It's going to keep going. So after this open circle right here, We have a closed circle here. And at this closed circle here, we can still keep going up, right? And then we keep going up until we reach this open circle right here. And after this open circle, there is no function, right? There's nothing left of our function. So this is going to stop right here at this y value of 3, right? So it's going to be from negative infinity to 3 with the parentheses. All right, good. And let's check now our intervals of increasing, decreasing, and constant. Again, any intervals of increasing, decreasing, and constant are going to be your x values. That's what you're looking for. Right, so going from the left to the right, right, we're going to go in this direction, right? So starting over here at this x value of -5, to get from this point to this point right here, we're going to have to go down, right? So that means we're going to be decreasing from -5 to -3, all right? Let's keep going. So we're going to, after this little gap, we're going to start again at this open circle, and then to get from this open circle to this closed circle, we're going to have to go up, right? Our function is going up. So that means we have an interval of increasing from -1 to 1. All right, let's keep going. After this gap, we're going to start right here at this open circle. And at this open circle, to go all the way to the right, we're going to be going down, right? Notice that our graph is going down. Right, so that means we're still decreasing. We have another interval of decreasing. So I'm going to write a U for union with a parentheses at 3, and we're going to go onwards to infinity. Right, so this right here is our interval of decreasing. This is increasing. And that accounts for our entire graph, right? So we're not going to have any constant interval. All right, and now let's find our function values. Right, so we have a function value. We want to find where x is -3, right? So that's going to be right here, all right? And what value of y is that, right? It's a closed circle, and it's going to be at a y value of 1. So f of -3 is going to be 1. Again, all of these, you're just going to be looking at your graph, all right? And then we want an x value of +1 is going to be right here, right? So it's going to be right here. And then we end up at this closed circle, and we end up at a y value also of 1. So like I was saying earlier, your y values are allowed to repeat. If it repeats, that's fine. Just include it in your range. All right, and that's all you have to do here. You're just looking at the graph and finding the associated y value. All right, and that's all you need to know for this lesson. Right, so you don't have to look at the next slide with the even and odd functions. And then finding the zeros, we did in the previous lesson. We did it in 2.2a.